Hello. All right, today we will be introducing you to Unity, and doing doing some basic level design, adding some player character, and some movement. This is a re-recording of an ADD workshop that was run in December 2023. But the content itself was quite interactive, and the recording didn't turn out to be what I thought super helpful. So I'm redoing this as a more sort of clinical or studio-based recording, so that you can pause and rewind to your heart's content. So the first things you'll need Unity Hub, the 2022.3 version, Visual Studio Code or Visual Studio. We'll be using Studio Code today. And for the asset packs, we'll do that live or during this, so that's not hugely important. And if you're familiar with programming concepts, video games, and sort of geometry, we'll just make a player character, build a level, have a little play around, and then we'll just talk about game engines themselves, talk about Unity as a game engine, and then creating a level. Obviously, as I say, this was created for a workshop, so the free time there pertains to that, but you can just pause whenever you want, of course. So a game engine is pretty much just a assemblage of different software frameworks, basically. So you have your renderer, so you can see what's on screen, with the 2D or 3D graphics engine, physics, and part of physics is collision detection, sort of audio and visual, so post-processing or sound effects, animation for character models, networking for multiplayer games, memory management for sort of a bit more low level if you're getting into how you're loading or unloading objects, and localization, so language support. The main three engines are Unreal Engine, Unity, and Godot. And the use of those are appropriate for what sort of project you're doing. Unreal has a lot of advantages for 3D games. They have an incredible library of models, textures, and it also uses blueprints, which people have, which is their visual scripting language. And for photorealism, Unreal Engine any day. Of course, there are limitations to that, where if you don't need something that is super high def and something a bit more pedestrian or quicker to create, Unity's a good middle ground, as you can, it still has a wide range of assets. It's widely used, widely supported, and when you create those models, you quickly get them exported, make them viewable on the web, so you can interact with 3D models, and has all the features of a conventional game engine. So where Unreal excels in kind of photorealism, Unity's a nice middle ground for example, low poly, or if you're doing something highly stylized. Godot is it's good. Godot. It's open source. It's mainly for 2D stuff. Some people do use it for 3D, but it's a lot newer, so there aren't the functions. The functionality of it is not as advanced or developed as the previous two. Importantly, game engines aren't just used for making games. They are used widely for all sorts of different things. So, for example, TV and film. So the Mandalorian, for example, the TV show, they used Unreal Engine to generate all of the backgrounds and the graphics and all the special effects. And with CGI's, while there are sort of special animation packages, the game engines are becoming increasingly popular as a way to do 3D modeling animation. If we look at game engines in architecture, there are a lot of similarities in the functions that they do in architectural software. While not as advanced, there are a lot of things that you will find familiar here. So you'll have a renderer, you'll have 2D graphic capabilities. You'll have some of them have scripting, so Rhino and Grasshopper, for example. Audio and visual, so post-processing or animation, and adding sounds to those. Where the rest of them, you don't really have them, but they're not really necessary, because architectural visualization in particular is about static images and photorealism, and so the emphasis is upon those. But the positive here is that the skills that you already have are directly applicable to game engines. The new things are supposed to be scripting and a new workflow. But when you create interactive models or create interactivity on top of models in game engines, there are a significant number of advantages in doing so, rather than attempting to use, let's say, for example, Rhino to do simulations. It sometimes is easier, quicker, and much more performant, as in the simulation will run better and you can make it more complex to do that in a game engine. Now, that's just one use of it, the simulation, of course. You could just use it for making or customizing a really snazzy visualization. Touched upon those briefly. So in architecture and urban design, the use of game engines is increasing. So, we have smart cities and digital twins, which rely upon, digital twins often use Unity. Smart cities, Internet of Things, but you need to find a way to kind of draw that data together and or visualize it. Parametric computational design, of course. Rhino and Grasshopper are the cornerstones of that. But if we're getting to more complex or computationally demanding solutions, game engines are better poised to take on that challenge in a programmatic sense. And in practice, obviously marketing, snazzy renders, and there's been quite a lot of work in using them for participatory planning practices as well, to make sort of more inclusive, or to be able to relay that expert knowledge of a planner with it for consultations, or even the generation of community-based design proposals. Getting started then, if we open the Unity Hub, create a new project, this does take a while to load up the first time. And so while that goes, I will discuss the editor while yours loads. So first thing, Unity Hub. There it is. There we go. So you'll see all this pop up. So click New Project. We want to go on Core 3D. Move that out the way here. You can see the stuff still. Yeah, go for it. Call it whatever you'd like. And when you go create, it will just set up all the binaries and things. And it should, yeah, okay, so it should open up like this. And that will take a while to build. So I have this in light mode. You may see it in somewhere around here, general. You may see it in dark mode like this when you first load it. But it doesn't matter. It's preference on whichever, however you want to view it. I'm going to keep it in dark mode for consistency's sake. Also, you won't have these. So let's just reset. That. Same as Photoshop or the Adobe stuff with the workspace layout. So let's talk about the UI, what you're greeted with. The four main panels are the hierarchy, which is a list of all your objects in the scene. And a scene is, you consider a level. So if we made a new one, that would be a different level. We have the inspector, which, as you can see, as we click on items, objects in here, we can see their properties. Below, the project browser. So we don't have much in here at the moment, but when we start to import assets and things, they pop up here. And the console, which when you run the game, if it doesn't work or there's an error, it'll appear here. In the viewport, you have the game view, which is, there's nothing in it at the moment, but as you can see, it's using the main camera as the display. And the scene itself is just, you just move things around and that's where you put your objects. Note that the Y here is the Z axis. And so if you're importing models where the vertical is Z, not Y, your model might be flipped around. That's an easy fix in some software. In Blender, you can, for example, you can check a box that flips that. Otherwise, you could just rotate. Your model, either using the sort of gumball or typing in the coordinates there. The way that Unity works with geometry is that it uses game objects. So any item in here is a game object, this and this. If we wanted to create a new one that we're going to use as a placeholder for the player, it's gone through the object. We use a capsule, like so, and it brings it into the world. As you can see, it's a bit below the plane of the world. This is 0. So if we go into this box, we can just type in the coordinates and it will send it up to the top. Like so. And we're going to rename this player. And we have a player, supposedly. I'm going to add a cube in as well, because we can see, as we did before with the positions, do that. We can also, of course, we can also change the rotations of the object. So if we go 90, 90. 90. As you see, it looks exactly the same. But if we did 45, 0, we can use these to quickly do it. And change the scale as well, if we want to. Like so. And we can link those together as well, if we wanted to maintain the cube. And that's pretty much it for adding geometry in the game. Of course, when you start to get to interactivity and texturing, there are a few more bits and bobs, but if you want to just add game objects, it is really just as simple as that. Just delete the cube, and let's create a player object. So we have a game object for it. It's our physical representation of the game world. But when we create a player, we want to attach all sorts of things. So we're going to do this as a first person. So the camera, you are the player looking at the camera's eyes. And that involves connecting these two together. So the camera's always moving with that. We're just going to create an empty game object called player. Yeah, call it the player. Call this the avatar. Like so, and then we can just drag those in and it groups those together. And if we go onto the main camera, if we just click it there, it shows a preview of the game window. We want to adjust it so that it sits on top of the capsule, like a sort of body and head. You can see it that way. We want to get the coordinates. Oh, actually, if we just reset this all to 0, 0, 0, and 0, we can do the same with the camera, like so, but then move that up 1.2. So setting on top of that. Okay, we'll do 1.5. 3. There we go. Do 1.3 on that. It's still below the level. Yeah, it is. Okay. So I've adjusted the components inside the object, and then I'm going to adjust the position of the object itself. And those are relative to that. Okay. So we have a body, a head on there. The camera, that's still tagged as main. Yeah. And just want to tag that as a player so we know what those are. That's fine. Okay. The next thing we can do is create what's called a prefab or prefabricated game object, which creates like a master copy of anything you create. So if you just click and drag this down here, you can see it turns blue. And if we double click that, it takes us into this sort of blueprint space. And to exit, we can just click here. And so to demonstrate this, if I duplicate this, just Control C and Control C, Control V. If I make changes to this, so let's link those, make that, for sake of demonstration, 10. When I go back into the game, both are affected. This is obviously very useful for a number of reasons. whilst in this we only have one player, if you were creating lots of buildings or importing lots of buildings into your engine, into your scene, and you realize, oh no, there's a mistaken one, having that prefab at the very start means that one change is reflected across the entire scene. You're not spending ages manipulating individual objects. Okay, so let's just delete that and go. A note, when you do this, you want to reopen the prefab to make any changes. If you make changes just here, it will only affect the one you have selected. So it overrides the properties of the prefab. So you can see where the overrides are, which is very helpful. So we have a player, but they don't really have anything to do in this world. Next, we will build a terrain. So pop into here, 3D object and terrain. This will create sort of big checkerboard, and this checkerboard pattern just denotes that there's no texture on it. It's pretty big in comparison to our player. I'm going to make it smaller for the sake of this. So when you click this object in the inspector, if you go over to this button here under the terrain component, we can change the width. 25. No, let's leave. Let's leave that as default for now. Don't worry about anything else too much for now. And I want to center this so the player spawns in the center. And if we just take the link, which we can do by taking the width and the length, so 25 divided by 2, and 25 divided by 2. But the Y is the top one. And it's gone all the way over there. Because it's minus. There we go. We could, of course, do that manually using the move tool as well. Like so. And you can choose where to get that point using this drop down here. So you could just move that to there as well. But if we click on it, ooh, it's very close. Something like that. Cool. So the terrain, we can go over to the paint terrain button. We can paint in texture. We can add holes like so. Like so. We can stamp it. So we can use these brushes. Set the height. Ooh. Like so. No, that's one. Brush size. There we go. Like so. Where you can create mountains and things very easily without having to manually create them. Of course, we could do that for the others as well. So that's the stamp tool. Then there's set height. This one, do 10 on that. And it's similar to the stamp tool. Maybe we won't use 10. Similar to the stamp tool, except the fact that you can paint with it. So a bit more freeform. And the opacity changes the speed in which that's applied. Let's do that so you can see. So you can create gradients and use softer brushes to not have such harsh edges, make that a bit more natural. I mean, that's pretty gross, but, and if you want to redo anything, you can just flatten all, or flatten tile if you have multiple tiles. And control, if you click that by accident, which I always do, Control Z. Set height, then, or the last one, then the razor lower. So this is similar to the set height, but it will just keep going. Like that. That's obviously very strong, but it will just keep building that terrain up and up and up. Like so. Okay. I'm going to quickly create a terrain in here, and I encourage you to do so also. Remember the size, I've chosen a small size just to be able to demonstrate this well, but you can always change that here to whatever you want, depending on what you need there. But I'd recommend if you're doing something a bit bigger, try to keep it to about 100, because once this is fixed, you can't really undo it easily without destroying all your work, and it will affect texturing later on. So the bigger the terrain, the more work you're going to have to put into making it look nice, or detailing it essentially. But it's mainly for this presentation anyway, the main issue on using a larger terrain is the texture sizes, but that is quick. We'll go over how to fix that as well. Okay, so I'm going to create this, speed up through it. You can mark to pause and spend as much time as you want on it, and then we'll jump into adding some detail. All right, that'll do for now. That's pretty basic, but it's got some elevation changes. It's got some dimples here and there. And no, the elevation changes are too steep. And that will affect, obviously, the texturing. Obviously, you don't know that yet, but that will affect the texturing. As you can see here, the square has been stretched. And that, if we put a texture on that, that would be reflected. So if you do have any egregious cliffs, for the purposes of this tutorial, I might better smooth those out. Or leave them in there if you want to see what happens. But we won't be going over how to fix that. Right. To create or to add texture, we go here. We can use the same brushes, create a terrain layer, and it wants a 2D texture. If we look at our list, we don't have any. We could use the particle one, if you're doing a sort of dance floor. Let's move that. And if we went to the material down here, we have the same problem. We don't have any. Oh, that's the physics material. So if we went to, whoops, we don't. No, that's fine. Let's see. There we go. If we go down here, we don't have any material layers. And when we create a new layer, you can see it adds it to here. Let's delete that as well. Rather than make our own or trying to find one that fits online, using seamless textures or something, we can go to the package manager, which will pop up in this window. And, oh, you won't have these in here. If we go to here, and type in environment, does it come up? No. I thought it would have. Okay. We will then instead go to. Oh. No. We need to go to the Unity Asset Store to download them. So if you open up your web browser, Unity Asset Store. We're presented with that. So we have the Unity Asset Store here. If we go to 3D and let's go down to free, we can see a list of all the things that we can add to our project. You will need to sign in using this, so the Unity ID, and then if you click Add to My Assets, it will get added to your account, and that will be reflected in the package manager. I've already downloaded a couple, but you can choose whatever you'd like. For this, I'd recommend just going for low poly assets. I think that if you look for high def, everything looks a bit mismatched. Or if you are looking to do more high def, definitely look to get assets from the same provider. So Unity Technology, for example, these are all free, and you can integrate that with that pretty easily. Or they have this 3D game kit that's got loads of textures and things involved inside of it. So this bit's up to you. Depends on what you're wanting to create, of course. And you can spend an enormous amount of time just sort of adding things in. Once you've added that to your assets, it will appear. It will appear in the package manager. So if it goes to Window, Package Manager, if we go to my assets, you can also just undock and dock any panels you want to, like so. So let's add a sky box. So I already have this downloaded on my hard drive. Oh, when that pops in, you'll get that. And you can choose which one you want to put in. I don't want any of those. Just want. Let's try those two. There we go. When you first do that, you'll be greeted by that icon. So you download it first and then you import it. When you do, there'll be a little folder that's created in your assets. Grab that. I'm also going to grab that. Don't need the scenes or the use. Yeah. Port that. That might do for now. That'll do for now. In the simple materials, we can see that we have, it's that one, is it? Okay. I can use the created prefabs in here. Because these are imported, they'll have separated like components. So this is a Unity prefab, but the original model is a FBX. Oh, what's going on? Okay. Yeah, the original model is a FBX, and so it performs some conversion to a Unity model. I'm gonna delete both of those again because clearly I need something. Clearly I need the things I didn't include. What was it? That one. And this one. If you're looking to bring in some terrain textures, I would recommend this pack here. It's got loads, they're very detailed, and it also comes with brushes for the terrain stamping, so you can create quite realistic stuff and some vegetation. Obviously, hyper realistic. Well, more realistic than low poly. Low poly being an art style short for low polygons. And so each 3D model is, the level of detail depends on how fine the mesh is. And so a simple object, for example, a cube, has 6 sort of faces, right? And those are constructed of, triangles, the most effective shape, so 12 triangles. Whereas if you have a circle, if you decrease the number of polygons that are making up the circle plus a curve is just a series of straight lines connected together, and a circle just a full loop of that. So if you reduce the number of lines, you eventually get to dodecahedron, octagon, hexagon, and it's back to a square. That's not really important information, just the way that the level of fidelity is determined by the number of polygons. Thus, low poly is intentionally not very detailed. Gosh, right. Okay, that took a while. Okay. Smooth that over a bit. Now we have the assets imported, we can see that we have some materials in there, and what they call terrain layers. So terrain layers are made up of a normal map, mask, and a diffuse map. So the way that it renders light, and you can see they've already created this for you. So to paint that onto the terrain, if we go to here, back to here, and if we edit terrain layers, we can add that one, that one, and just add a few here and there. So they're all in that one. Some pebbles went up. Using the brushes as before, we can just take those as a palette and just brush done. You see there are repetitions here and there, and if you can scale it up, the texture up by doing that as well, by editing the tiling settings here. We do it, all the way to 4. From afar, it looks okay, which is good if you're doing background or anything. Up close looks okay too. So that helps you to break up repetitions. It's a little stretch for my liking. So I'll take it to 2. And just paint on there. And the same as before, you have all these brushes you can use to paint textures on. You can just do it like that. So say if we were to create some snow in that shape, we can just do it like that. Or like that. Which is nice. It makes not loads quicker, but just a bit easier here and there. Again, I'm going to fast forward and just texture this up and leave you to do the same. the next thing we're going to do after we've added the texture is add trees. And so rather than, as we did earlier, putting every game object in the level individually, as you might have seen as I was doing this, if I move this, the player doesn't move with it, so I have to keep resetting it. With the terrain, if we use the trees one, and if we add a tree, and we should have a tree from one of the asset packs. It's not the low poly ones. Yeah, I could use one of those, I suppose. That one. No. So and you can just paint them on like so, which obviously saves you a lot of time. And so if we just paint them on, you can change the size and the density, and you can randomize heights and things like that. So you can create quite nice detailed forests pretty quickly. Like so, which is nice. Well, you could also use these models and just replace the textures to be something a bit more realistic. So I don't always have to create everything from scratch. But I do want some tall trees, but I don't want them. So you can also add more trees like so. Add one of those just for variety. Do that, or we can mass place. And that will bring up this. Don't need that. Let's just do 10. Place, and it will just pop them in there for you, which is quite nice. Saves you a lot of time. If you're going over again, and you can just do that again and again and again. Let's go for more this time. There we go. So the little tools on the terrain do help you speed things up. And as you can see, they're not game objects in the hierarchy. And when we move this, they will come with it, which is nice. So it means all your ground plane is kept together without messing this up. And you can, as with the brush, you can erase, and you can only erase certain types if you wanted to. So just only erase those. And change the brush size here. So you get quite a lot of control over it, as well as if you're really interested in taking it further, you can adjust the level of detail and the loading times as well, which for more complicated or graphically demanding games is very useful. So let's pop. Oh gosh. Pop some trees around like so. It's been too long doing this. And there we go. Some trees in there. And a little bit of detail into the world. On top of the trees, you can add, if you go to the next button along, you can add grass. We'll go to detail mesh and bring up another one of these. You can see this has more options as well, which is nice. But we're just going to keep that as it is for now. If we click this one, add brush size, opacity. If we brush them on, we can start to generate. We can start to add in sort of grasses and things, which is very nice. So up here, so up there. Obviously, the mismatch of the real and fake is a bit the high sort of low poly and not is a bit jarring. A bit tall, aren't they? That's fine. We can just edit them there. And you can, as you saw there, they adjust in real time. Let's see. That makes sense. One. And we can make those, long if we really wanted. Obviously, you're stretching the textures. a fair bit there. Let's do the max 2. And just, there we go. Maybe I'll add some grass in there now. And we could do the same with this one as well. And just like the trees, you can erase them individually or everything at once. Quite a lot of control here. 0.75. Let's keep those like that. There's some sort of variation. It's not the same height. And if we just pop into it, it's super low res at the moment because we haven't set. It kind of defaults to low res view, but we'll do that in a minute. Cool. And we have. Oh, those trees are bothering me. Let's see if we can just get something a bit more. Let's download that. While that downloads, I'm going to look at this All Sky free that I downloaded from here. So Sky free. This one here. And these are just skyboxes that we add to the scene. And if you have used view area before, it's much the same principle. We have a cube map, drag it and drop it. Add a light. It's quite. Nope, oops. That's some dusk. You can add, yeah, so it comes with lighting as well. So it automatically adjusts the global illumination once you pop that in as well to match the sky, which is very handy. You get super weird with it if you wanted to. Don't know if that is that alien, but just go for a plane. So that's that sunset as well. It's a bit washed out. Maybe something more reflective of Manchester. There we go. Let's go for an overcast sky. Feels like home. And if you want to change the view settings, so if you wanted it so the objects don't fade from view as close, you can just adjust that. And this is all that grass, the wind here, so you can see the simulation running there. I'll turn that down. It doesn't need to be that high. Also make it slightly more green, like so. Excellent. Okay. Oh, got a few trees left over there. That's fine. And that is the basics of Unity, really. If you want to spend more time doing the sort of design of the terrain and making those environments, you can. With models, it's really quite simple. As you can see here, you have the import stuff, and if you just drag it in, you can just bring stuff in like that. And so for your architectural model, it's the same principle. You save it as a compatible format. I can't remember the full list, but those are available on the Unity documentation or just online generally. And depending on how you do it, you could either texture it in the origin, or you could do it in here if you've imported it right. I recommend an FBX importing it in. And if you're unable to do that, you could export it as an OBJ. download Blender, import it into Blender, and export it back out again. It's a bit convoluted, but you could do it that way. Last thing then, I think I was going to go through the code aspect in lots of detail, but if you want to get this person to move and have some interactivity, if we open up the player object, player prefab here, we want to add a character controller component, like so. That's all fine. And we want to add a script. No, we want to add a script. New script. There we go. And we'll call that player movement. CS. So okay, it's automatically going to do that. And we see that's added down there. We're going to need to edit that script. And just compiling that. And what's this? Oh, trees that are downloaded. We'll come back to that in a moment. Yeah, sure. Come back to that in a moment. But to integrate VS Code, if we just pop down to preferences, bring up this, external tools, and code on that drop down. And just close that. And so if we double click this, then it will open in the external editor, which is here. Oh, why is it so? Don't need that open. If you go to that link, you can find the code in full there. And you don't ever have to touch this. You have the, you can just reuse that time and time again if you'd like. The terrain tools, super helpful and super quick in comparison to other software where you'd have to place everything individually. The kind of way that it deals with painting and putting objects down in one is super nice. Otherwise, I think that is that's pretty much everything. I think that gets you started off in terms of how to make stuff. And the benefit, of course, of doing it in a game engine like Unity is the ease of getting graphical elements or models and textures, because it's what it's built for, and the extensibility. So you can always import the whole thing back out if you wanted to as a object into Rhino, if you want to do some other stuff on top. Or you can add interactivity on top of it and send it around. Excellent. I hope that was helpful. If you have any questions, you can reach out. And if you'd like either another Unity session or something a bit more in depth or anything more specific, do raise your hand and see what we can do. Excellent.